and there's always that balance between when to give information, when not, and does the giving of the information and all the details all the time then distract from your bigger picture that you have as a practitioner? But I think it's so key in that female environment to relay that to the ladies.
How you live your life, as a professional athlete, it's you're living your life. You have to make a life choice. And I think it's not until a few years down the line it's like, oh, actually this is a life choice. Like everything you do of an evening, that's going to impact you tomorrow in training.
Like I've sat in tons of meetings before where teams have talked about values and what's our values this year, what are our team aims, and like I'll be honest, 95% of the time it's complete bullshit. Like people don't live by those values, they're just words written on a page. No one really cares about them.
You don't need to change it, you just need to, you understand an athlete, and actually you have to take time, and that educational piece is the well-being piece, and it's a bit of everything. It's not changing this, it's just going, okay, you're not okay today, we'll get through it today, tomorrow you'll be fine again.
Hey Ben, Abbie, welcome to both of you on the podcast.
Hi, nice to be here.
No, it's good to have you guys. So maybe for those who don't know who you guys are, can you talk a little bit about who you are, what you do? Abbie, I'll let you go first on that one.
Yeah, so I'm Abbie Brown, England 7's captain for the women. Also been to Olympic Games and got myself a bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games as well. So yeah, I play rugby. That's kind of all I really do. Do a bit of coaching on the side. But yeah, my main kind of focus is rugby.
Awesome. Ben?
My name is Ben. So I was lucky enough to be lead S&C for the England 7's women's programme last year. Previous to that was sort of assistant with the men and sort of come from sort of an education background in lecturing as well.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have both of you guys on. I think it's going to give some great insights on everything that's going on at the level that you guys are evolving at. So to begin with, first topic I want to touch on is the main differences between or differences and similarities between women's versus men's rugby. So maybe Abbie, if you want to chime in on that first, and then Ben, you can follow up after that.
Yeah, I guess mainly what like Ben focused on is our physicality. Not to say that we're not as physical, but our physical attributes are very different. You know, the men are a lot faster than us, and they kind of have those attributes. They're a lot like taller than us, but bigger than us. And I think it's not necessarily, it's almost a similarity as well, because although we're both still as physical, they're just formed in different ways. And the people you come up against are the same as well. So yeah, it's, I guess, kind of that would be my main differences, is that side of it. The mental side of it is probably pretty similar, what we go through. We both probably just tackle it slightly differently. I know being around some of the boys and stuff, they definitely deal with things a lot more front on than, or seem to tackle things more front on than we do. That's probably like one of the main things. But yeah, like I think there are similarities within it, but our physical attributes are different. But it doesn't mean to say that they're inadequate. It just means to say that they're different.
Go ahead, Ben.
So yeah, like I think what Abbie touched on in terms of certainly some of the physical outputs, you'll have differences, but you know, certainly as the game is evolving, and I guess we'll touch on this later on, but certainly as you know, women's sport is continually pushing boundaries, developing, growing. Certainly some of those disparities are starting to narrow. So if you look at, I don't know, rugby sevens as an example of that, like I think that rugby sevens, certainly Abbie and some of the girls are some of the best athletes that I've sort of ever seen and worked with, you know. Like the game's becoming a lot quicker, their outputs, their metrics. So for example, if you look at some of their GPS metrics are becoming, you know, greater, the demands are becoming greater. You know, the girls, not only are they getting quicker and fitter, but you know, they're growing in stature and size as well. So I think that there's certainly some trends that are similar to that then on the male circuit as well. And I think with regards to that, I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on a bit of the psychological differences between sort of the male and female environments, but I think some of the differences as well around, you know, opportunities and professionalism of the sport. Obviously, women's professionalism is far newer than that of the men's environment.
Mhm.
And I think only as more time goes on, then like I said, that disparity will decrease. But I don't know what Abbie thinks on that.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say that actually that's so key, that the men are 5-6 years in the professional game ahead of us. So actually they're going to be better than us. They're going to be stronger than us. They're going to be more robust than us. And all these different attributes that probably are the differences will probably, like Ben is saying, that we'll probably catch up with. And actually they're getting far greater, or far less, should I say, differences than they have done in the past.
Yeah, and maybe with that, if you see the men's maybe kind of spearheading the pro aspect of the sport, maybe there's been some learning going on there that can then be trickle down to the women's side that's following, and hopefully, quote unquote, not take as long to get to the same level of professionalism, organization, and all those kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's good that they've had that professionalism for so long, and almost we can learn not to be like them and to kind of follow them exactly, because we'll always have our own way of doing things, but to learn off what they do and what went really well for them and what went really bad for them, and actually being like, okay, so that didn't work for you, could it work for us? Yeah, maybe some things do. However, there are other bits that actually no, doesn't work for either squad, and it's kind of, that's how it is.
Just with that as well, quickly, Sean, I think,
Go for it.
Abbie would be a testament to this. And even if you look at our own environment within the England Sevens and the differences between sort of the male and female programs, like I wasn't there from the start, but I assume that there was, a huge disparity at the beginning of what was offered to the male program in terms of resources, availability of that, and the female program. Now, certainly when I was in post last year, that disparity we tried to narrow up. So like that's probably testament to Simon, who sort of oversaw the program, and the various coaches that have come in and demanded more resource availability for the women's program. That even in our small ecosystem, that started to narrow as well, which is obviously helps the more resources and staff that are available for the women, the better the opportunity they have to grow and develop.
Yeah, sorry, just gonna jump on the back of that.
Go.
When I first joined the squad, we were in SSP in like a small little corridor, kind of dealing with what we could. And then just before COVID happened, we were at the Lensbury, like coaching staff was all kind of joined. We were doing analysis with the guys. Like had the same team rooms. We had like a big kind of upstairs area and a space. We lifted in the same gym, and everything was much more, you could see what other people were doing and you have more of an idea of it. And I think a bit more appreciation for what each other go through as well, which I think is really important.
Abbie, how long have you been in the circuit, playing at a high level, with whether it's on the club side or on the international side?
So I did 1 year at Bristol Ladies and Six Nations with the England 15s in 2015. And then I've been in the sevens ever since. So yeah, 5 years I've been in the sevens.
So maybe to build onto the topic we're on just now, can you talk about what have been the major, let's say, advances in the development of women's rugby overall for you as an athlete, as a player? What are maybe the additions to the staff that have made the biggest difference? Is it maybe more physio time? Is it the analysis side? What has made the biggest difference in the growing of the staff and the organizations that you've been a part of so far?
I think it's the how we've learned to be more professional, because when you go into a professional environment or you're made professional, you have to learn how to be professional. I know that sounds really stupid, but you almost, how you live your life as a professional athlete, it's you're living your life. You have to make a life choice. And I think it's not until a few years down the line it's like, oh, actually this is a life choice. Like everything you do of an evening, that's going to impact you tomorrow in training. And it's like those little things that you probably didn't think about before. And I guess kind of the educational side of things, I think we've got so much better at the educational side of things. And like Ben coming on board, like with his background, understands the science behind things, and it's the whys, especially for us women, like giving us whys and telling us why we're doing something is so important. I can't even like tell you how important that is, but and actually to have people that you trust and have the knowledge to tell you those things is super important. And that's all part of the professional side. Like it's been shown in the men's game, and they've got this and this, and we just hadn't had it because well, it hadn't been professional for that long. But you can see it across not just England, but all the other countries, how the women's game has come on so much, and just the physicality and how fast people have got, and how like everything around it, kind of people's different cultures and stuff has just grown massively. And I think that's a credit to how long we've been in the professional game now, and just you just keep getting better and you keep getting more professional almost.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ben, maybe to continue on that that same line of thinking, can you talk about the differences that you have seen working with both male athletes and female athletes from all perspectives, psychological, physiological, communication, motivation, like all these? How do they compare?
Yeah, so I'll talk about some differences that I've seen more in like a a psychological mindset. I think I just want to touch on one thing Abbie said, that like certainly this COVID time, although there's been some downs, it's quite a nice time to have a bit of reflection and look at your practice. And I think certainly with Abbie, like she mentioned about and before I say these points, obviously like there's individual differences to any environment, but the general sort of rule of thumbs for sort of differences between sort of male and female environments. So certainly the questions as to the whys. So like I can't remember who did the study, but they looked at sort of female and male differences of their mindset, and how a woman has like a female environment, they have like a bigger picture, like mindset approach. They need to know where the little things fit in that bigger picture, and why they're involved and how they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from me, certainly, I probably didn't do a great job at times of that, of giving the details as to the whys. And there's always that balance between when to give information, when not, and does the giving of the information and all the details all the time then distract from your bigger picture that you have as a practitioner? But I think it's so key in that female environment to relay that to the ladies. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm withholding the information, okay, why am I doing that? And making sure I relay that back. So that's definitely one thing that I would improve on myself, and that I've reflected on. And I think certainly that explanation of the why is almost like trying to link it into some sort of story and theme. So obviously for Abbie, her end goal for her and her squad was Tokyo 2021 and medaling at that. So how does everything we do relate to that final goal, and link with that process and development on from that? Certainly, I think that, and I got recommended a book called Top Dog by, I think it's Poe Bronson or something, by Simon Amor, who was the head of the program, and it talked a lot about female and male differences, and it talked about how like a lot of female environments like to put relationships at sort of the expense of competition. So they would choose sort of relationship over competition, and almost sacrifice that competitive element to keep that relationship intact. And I think that's something that you see differently with the guys, is that everything is focused on, competition and being better. And it doesn't matter whether, you have a tiff with a teammate or a Barney or whatever, that's the sole aim. Now, there's certain characters, and I think that, credit to Abbie and Meg, and they've done a huge, an amazing job of really driving competition within training. And I don't know if you agree with this, Abbie, but there's certainly a change in that mindset, and that development sort of, I guess you've probably seen a huge development over the time that you've been in the 7's program, but just in the short time that I've been involved, I've certainly noticed a bit of a difference with that. I think, another thing is around that building of relationships, and showing sort of that kindness, and showing that you care, like that goes a long way. That's showing that you're interested and invested in that person, that you have, you will do everything that you can and go out of your way to make that individual better. And I think that that goes a long way, certainly in the female environment. I think sometimes that can be perceived and exploited as a bit of weakness, maybe in a male environment, is if you show too much niceness. So yeah, I think that's another difference. I think what was the other thing that I read in there that was really interesting for me? Oh, like a dyadic pair, so like a relationship within a male squad between two people, or a relationship in a female squad, like your mate or something like that, is that there has to be sort of a hierarchical like energy or equal effort within that relationship. So there's not one person going, I'm doing all the work, I'm not. And I think that was a key factor that I found quite interesting as well. And I think the other thing that that was mentioned, and it was talking about a USA football coach and how he developed like one of the best teams within the USA. And it talked about in sort of critical situations within any sort of game scenario, it was, do you play to win or play to lose? And it was talking about how a lot of the time, and Abbie might have more examples of this, is when you're in sort of a really critical environment. You know, they did a study looking at female tennis and some of the majors, and when there was sort of a really close competition, you know, how the game changed and how their sort of strategy towards winning changed. And you know, that was a really interesting point that I think that certainly, you know, I've seen some amazing games with these girls this year when they played against New Zealand for 20 minutes. You know, they go into the game being the underdogs, you know, playing it around, not expecting anything. Oh my God, we're winning at half time. You know, it gets to sort of 17, 18 minutes. We're still winning. That critical moment comes, and like that game starts to tighten up, and you're now playing to not lose rather than playing the way that you did that got you there in the first place. So I think that's a really interesting factor. And you know, how can you use that certainly within the S&C environment and turning that almost fear into a competitive plus and introducing that in sort of in your whole environment and everything you do. So sorry, waffled on a fair bit there about some differences.
Not plenty to talk about. Abbie, can you maybe bounce on some of those things that Ben talked about?
Yeah, I think the play to lose one's really interesting. I think we, as a squad, again, just before COVID, it was something we spoke about quite a lot. It was we need to go and play to win. We're not playing not to lose. And I think we got into a bit of a rut because we always were on the back end of like, we had that loss or that quarterfinal, or it was always one game for us, and we kind of hitting around the 6th, 7th kind of marker, but also at times like top 3. And then you kind of like, how do you try and create a winning atmosphere when you're not always winning? And I think that's something that is really hard, and something that we've definitely tried to focus on. I guess that comes with the competitiveness that you were saying about, is that actually we've tried to be like, no, let's be more competitive, because it's only going to make people better and want to win, rather than being afraid of doing something or playing to not lose. Do you know what I mean? So actually how do you bring that competitive side, but also it's okay to be wrong. It's a really hard balance to get, and especially with women, because we're very emotional with things. We're very a bit like Ben saying, kind of, you know, we could be, one day could be great and everyone could be on the same page, really competitive, and then the next day you come in, everyone does the exact same, but someone's having a bit of a wobble, and actually it's the other way around, you know. But yeah, I definitely think it's something we need to get better at as a squad. I think it's something that you can continue to work on, is that playing to win and that attitude with it.
Just on that, Sean, what Abbie said there again is that so that the same thing that looked at like a woman's sort of mindset, and knowing where a sort of everything fits in that bigger picture type approach. There's obviously that nature, certainly in the female environment, of that tend and befriend, where it's a bit more sort of alarm and aggression in that male environment. Certainly within that female environment, you know, the relationships are really strong, and obviously that paired relationship comes from like an evolutionary perspective of like hunter-gatherer days, but certainly that tend and befriend is really important to the group and those individuals. Like, I'm sure, you know, if Abbie's having I don't know, down day, someone's pissed her off in training, like there's certain people that she would rely on to sort of settle her and allow her to focus on what she needs to do for the rest of the day, you know. So
maybe Abbie, just to continue on that, can you talk about some of the challenges that you've experienced as not only as a player but as a captain? And like you said, women sometimes deal with things differently than men, and so how do you navigate that environment?
Yeah, so I think a little bit like what Ben's saying is that caring side is very much me. I'm very kind of want to make sure everyone's okay, because then I believe if someone's happy and okay, you're going to get the best out of them. Now that might be the bad way of looking at it, but that's just me as a captain. And I think I've been captain for 4 years now, and I've definitely learned a lot in the 4 years. Like I'm still not perfect. So I've got a lot of things to learn, but actually I've learned how to be me and how to be me as a captain, which I think is really important in the process I've kind of had the last few years, is that I've learned not to be somebody I'm not. And actually I struggle with those kind of confrontational kind of conversations, but that's okay. And that's okay to struggle, but as long as kind of I'm having it for the right reasons. And I think a little bit like what Ben says is that I try and build relationships really strongly, not only with my players, but with my coaches, my staff members, because I think that's so important. And like, we're all going for the same goal. So our goal now is to medal at Tokyo, you know, so that's our goal. And actually, how do you best get there? And how do you best, like Ben's saying, get the best out of everyone involved? And I definitely think those relationships, and say, for example, Ben needs to hold something back, but actually I can have a conversation with him like what are you holding back from us? And we can have that conversation. It doesn't need to say the rest of the girls need to know, and then I can help him decide almost from my point of view and the player's point of view, do we need to know that, or actually hold off a day because something else has gone on, you know. And I definitely think it's the off pitch stuff that people don't really see as well. Like, I kind of think, I thought when I first got it, I was like, oh, I can do that. I've got a motivational chat. I'm not really that kind of person, but I can give it a go. I'll give a motivational chat at half time kind of thing. And I've definitely learned that it's way more than that. And it's more about bringing the squad together, and actually how do you drive standards, put people in uncomfortable situations, but almost be their shoulder to cry on. And trying to balance all of those things is hard, and I definitely do get it wrong sometimes. And I kind of reflect on some things. I'm like, I wish I shouldn't have said that, or shouldn't have done that how I did. But then it's how I kind of react to that situation. And if I haven't liked how I've said something, I will always go back the next day and be like, look, I'm sorry, I'd said it for these reasons, you know, or explain myself, because then it gives people the opportunity to understand why you've done something the way you have.
I think on that, what Abbie said is that, so one thing I've learned over being across the sort of men's and women's programs is how influential sort of the captains are. And like, testament to Tom Mitchell, like he's incredibly, like, you know, instrumental for the men's program. But I think that in a women's program, having someone like Abbie is even more so important, because there's so much other stuff that you have to deal with. You know, you need to have such a high level of emotional intelligence. You need to be able to communicate. Like, Abbie's helped me on so many occasions where, you know, I'm not, you know, maybe there's times where I've been frustrated, and, you know, you have to, there's ways of how you verbalize that to the rest of the group, so you don't lose the players for a week or so. And like, I think, you know, like Abbie touched on, she's got so many other, you know, almost jobs that she has to do just around the motivational speech, that I think that captain's role is hugely instrumental. And I think that that's a testament to Abbie, of like how much she's focused on developing herself as a captain, and, you know, how she's learned how to bring the best out in the group. And, you know, I think that any coaching staff, S&C, medical, head coach, you know, there's that book, The Captain's Class, and it talks about that importance of captaincy. And I think that is, you know, that is exaggerated even more in that female environment.
Yeah, Abbie, can you maybe give some practical examples of the things that you have to deal with as a captain that you didn't envision before you got the title, you got the role?
Yeah, what kind of? I guess there's all sorts. There's all sorts. So, when for example, like Ben, he was a new staff member that came in, and then when you come into an environment that's kind of already set, like no one else really changed apart from Ben, and it was adjusting. And I think we're going to touch on it, but a male coach coming into a women's environment, you kind of have to learn a little bit and learn quickly, because actually we do deal with things differently. And I guess, like Ben's saying, like, if he's maybe said something or it's not gone how he would have wanted, I can always pick him up on that. And I think it's kind of getting the respect and understanding somebody, but also like learning about them and like why they've done something the way they have, or they might just be super passionate or super angry, or their emotion might have taken over them in that moment. And how do we help get back to kind of, we talk about red and blue brain, and that blue brain being your calm, content self, and your red brain being the person that is you, but it says something in a rash kind of way. But I guess also kind of from a kind of, we always say like politics kind of view, and there's always something going on, like moving parts and people behind the scenes. Like we had a manager called Joe Tyler, who was amazing, absolutely amazing, at her job, and and she had so much other things to deal with, and it would be like, oh, can we go and why are we not on this pitch today, or why are we on this pitch? And it would always be like, oh, those little bitty things that was all the kind of politics. I call it politics, but I don't really know what else to call it, but that kind of side to it, that
logistics, politics,
yeah, that kind of side to it, that actually, how do you feed that into the girls, or we have to push training back an hour because of XYZ. Like you say it to the girls, just we're pushing training back, done. People will go, well, hang on a minute, that's not fair, and react to it. Whereas if you kind of, I go away to Joe and go, why have we done this? Got it, how it is, and then relayed it back to the girls, maybe on an individual basis, because everyone's so different in our squad, but I've done it in a way that everyone's happy with it, even if they weren't going to be in the first place. Which does probably make my job a little bit harder, and I probably spend too much time making sure everyone else is okay before myself. But I also believe that that's going to get the best out of the team, and that's why I do it.
It's almost being that filter between the staff and the squad, and making sure that the information that passes through is sound and it is going to resonate with the team, like you said, because if it comes across a certain way from a staff member, maybe they won't understand it as well as if you try to bring it to them, right? So it's almost like you're on that edge between, I'm part of the team, but I'm also the link between the squad and the staff, and so you have to kind of play on both edges.
Yeah, I guess there's it depends what the message is. I think that's the key bit, is what it is. Because I know there's obviously loads of players that got obviously relationships with the staff, and that's all great. But I think there's definitely kind of the question side of it. People always come to me and ask me 50 questions about a certain situation, and I might not have the answers. So it's like, some people don't want to have that direct conversation with the coach or whatever it might be, but actually, I guess kind of the filter, the kind of the in-between guy as well to help.
Maybe we can transition to talking about something you mentioned, Abbie, is a coach, a male coach working in a women's team environment. So maybe Ben, you can start on that. What have been some of the challenges or the adjustments that you've had to make coming into a squad of women?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I've worked at a couple of female teams. I think this one's probably been the most difficult to bed in straight away. Like, sort of my predecessor KJ, obviously really well respected sort of S&C coach, very experienced, really well bedded into the team, had like amazing relationships with all the players. So, coming into any environment like that is always, really hard shoes to fill. So like having that awareness in the first place, knowing sort of what a challenge it was going to be, and she was amazing. She gave me like a good insight into sort of the group, and help with my transition for that, which I thank her for. I think for me, there's a lot of female environments don't necessarily have a preference. So with regard to sort of male and female coaches, I think like obviously the traditional way, because of lack of opportunity and stuff, as we've spoke about with regards to sort of female coaches, is that there's a male coach and female players, obviously, like, and quite rightly so, that's changing a lot now, which is great. But I think certainly a lot of the difficulties don't necessarily come from that male and female group, but more regards to having an awareness of sort of specific individual relationships. And a lot of the girls have like an own sense of structure and routine that they were used to. So I was very conscious about coming in and disrupting that. I think, and I had a really good conversation with the head coach Charlie Hayter about this, and we're talking about sort of his views on sort of male coaches in a female environment. I think the normality is for male coaches to come into a female environment and shower a lot of praise into the group. Just I don't know why, that's just how it is. And you speak to a lot of sort of elite female environments, and that's a natural thing to do, is want to come in and want to shower praise, where sort of I don't really like that approach. And maybe that comes from sort of having a few more years of sort of female experience under my belt than some. But I think that that probably didn't sit as well with certain players as it did with others. I mean, some players loved it, some don't. But again, that comes down to individual preference. Like for me, I don't like to celebrate mediocrity. Like you give credit where credit's due. So I think always going, yeah, that's great. I don't think that really develops a culture of sort of elite performance. I don't know what Abbie thinks on that, but that's certainly.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think it's hard coming into especially our environment because we're all very strong, independent women, like very, very strong, and maybe a little bit some more set in their ways than others. And I think if you have someone come in and disrupt that and kind of almost blindside you, you get your back up, and it's just, I think for us, we kind of like, oh, like what, and kind of like had to adjust. And I think any change, we're all kind of not the best at change, I don't think, as a squad. And I think we had our fair share of changes as well. Like we've gone through a lot. We kind of, you know, we were full-time, then we were part-time, and then different players moving back and forth, different coaches, different staff leaving. And we had a whole mix of this within about 2 years. And I think that whole, and like we had to move house, and like, do you know what I mean? So there's so many different things. And I think this was just another thing that we were like, had to get used to again, with Ben coming in. But yeah, I do agree on the whole praise thing. I think it's kind of, I'm also like that. I'm like, let's not just praise it because it was all right. Like, we need to praise it because it was really bloody good.
Or at least tell me what I can do to get better, right? Like maybe going back to what Ben said about explaining why. Well, you also need the pieces to move forward, and just saying it was good or it was bad is not enough.
Exactly. And like I think the other challenge probably Ben and Charlie probably had as well, coming probably more from coming from the men's 7's lot to our lot, is that our age difference. And we had a lot of girls who were still have a lot of girls that are 19, 20 years of age, still at uni, some of them first time they've ever lived away from home. And then we had Fisher, who was like 35, and then some of the others that were like 28, 29. Do you know what I mean? So you have such a difference, whereas the men, a lot of them are kind of like you mentioned about earlier, Ben, the hierarchy almost. So like you had the top guys who were all kind of late 20s, been around for donkey's years. Then you had like your academy lot, and then you had a few boys in the middle, but not many. And then with us, you had completely the other like end of the spectrum. I think that was also challenging because like you kind of had to be really careful what you said to some of these younger players, because actually they'd never been in an environment where it was so competitive that you didn't catch that ball today, that's not good enough. And actually that might have just set them off, when actually we're just trying to drive standards. It's not an attack on them. It's just, you need to get your hands up. Come on, like you can do it, but get your hands up, you know? And I think that's where, like Ben's saying about the praise thing, it's not all like, but you did catch that one ball. It's like, no, actually that wasn't good enough, you know?
Yeah, like you said, you have to have certain expectations if you want to drive performance and move forward. Ben, go ahead.
No, I think from that as well is that, you know, a couple of sort of philosophies of mine of creating any environment is to sort of be like, I love having fun, and I love it being engaging, and I love driving that competitiveness. And that was something that I really wanted to bring to the environment. But like, I was really conscious about changing too much. But, you know, through that process, you know, I did, even in the short term, I did see some sort of development of, you know, athlete autonomy. And that was really important to me as being more of like an educator. And then if an athlete becomes sort of quite autonomous and almost makes your job a little bit redundant in a way, that's awesome. That's an awesome place to be, because, you know, you've got a group of really educated women, like Abbie said, really strong, independent women, you know, who and that, I believe that was a, you know, really nice environment to be in. Oh, sorry, go on, Abbie.
No, I was just saying, you definitely came in and like, you definitely changed it, like how we weren't, like our athleticism, like you changed it. And I think that was like credit to you as well, that I think we probably didn't react, like we just keep saying all this change and all of a sudden and stuff. And I think that was always going to be us, and probably how we reacted to it was one thing, but actually over time we all started seeing the differences, and actually you kind of like, oh, maybe that was good for me, and like the whole reflective thing of, oh, maybe that one extra core session, that was probably good for me, you know. And actually you don't realize it until you have to reflect on it, and you go, actually that was really beneficial. But at the time you're like, why the hell am I doing this other core session? I've done 5 already. Like, do you know what I mean?
when Abbie was throwing tin around the gym and flying down the pitch like a rocket, she was animated. Or I should say like a gazelle in your opinion.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think that, Sean, just on that, I'll give you one example of you know, probably something which the girls didn't enjoy when I first went into the environment, is that obviously I was conscious about making too much changes, but I remember they had these they had them given these sort of 2 free passes for the whole season, which each player had and could use at any time. So if they'd had a really hard week, you know, it was the end of a long block, they go, right, I'm going to use my free pass. I'm not coming to the gym on a Friday afternoon or whatever. I come in and was like, right, they're obsolete. That's not happening. And like, I just remember looking around the room and the face, like, I've never been so petrified in my whole life. The faces of some of the girls, especially some of the older girls, people like your Fishers or Debs or someone like that, like, and you turn around and see they're looking at me. I was terrified in that point.
It wasn't a good move, let me tell you that.
Yeah, but I think you know, you look back now and hopefully you can see that it was part of the bigger picture which I was trying to create. You know, that working culture, working environment, and just it was. Yeah, I probably could have gone about it a different way, but it was part of the plan that I had going forward to change. You know, the mindset, like Abbie said, about that professionalism. And because of the duration that they've been professionals, especially the group, the age of some of the girls, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So, you know, a lot of the girls had to be educated how they looked after themselves and how they best prepared. And, you know, there was a lot of involvement around that afterwards. I mean, you know, some of the older girls find that they've been in the program for years, so I understand that. But, you know, there was a big educational piece around that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like, that was a big change, obviously, coming in. We were kind of happy to have it, and we were like, oh, so nice. And then obviously he came in and was like, it's gone. I think it's really interesting because, for example, I know myself and a couple of the girls were like, well, we never use it, obviously, because I'm not going to miss a session like that. That's, to me, is not me. Some people, it's like, I need a bit of break, fair. But the young, like, speaking broadly, some of the young girls will just see it as like, oh, free pass, sweet, see you later. Do you know what I mean? So that's probably why it was a good thing to take them away. But at the time, it was it was a car crash. Is what it was.
Noted.
Today's episode is sponsored by Strength Coach Network, the #1 education and networking platform for strength and conditioning coaches. Strength Coach Network offers over 200 hours of video education delivered by elite level presenters such as Dan Pfaff, Jada Mayo, Derek Hansen, Carl Dietz, and Buddy Morris. If you work with or want to work with team sport athletes and take your coaching to the next level, you will find everything you need to know on topics such as speed development, plyometric training, conditioning, rehab, program design, and much, much more. Strength Coach Network also allows you to interact with hundreds of coaches from all over the world, ranging from top NFL, NBA, and MLB coaches all the way to the grassroots level. You can ask questions, respond to popular threads, and get valuable insight from the best in the business. Strength Coach Network also covers career and business development tailored specifically for coaches. If you want a resume critique, need to get ready for an interview, or are looking for professional networking advice, go to strengthcoachnetwork.com/upside to get your first month at half price. That's strengthcoachnetwork.com/upside. Maybe building on that, Abbie, you alluded to the importance of having a certain structure and routine in place in order to be able to drive performance on the long run, and that all those changes over a short period of time does make things more difficult. So how do you go about, you as a captain, you as a player, how do you go about creating a performance environment for your team? And then Ben, I think you can follow up on that and answer the same question as well.
Yeah, so it is a difficult one, and I think when your team changes a lot with the players you have and the coach you have, it is really hard to get some continuity. But I think something we definitely worked hard at is that, how do we keep driving it? How do we keep, with all the changes that go on, how do you keep moving forwards? How do you keep, you know, the wheels turning even with all this chaos going on? And I definitely think, especially the group we have, that it's taken a lot of different changes and a lot of getting things wrong, learning and not getting it right, and having difficult conversations at times to actually now be in a place where you're like, okay, if that change comes, we're just going to adapt and we're going to keep moving, and that's going to be okay, and we're going to deal with it and we'll be fine. And I think especially after COVID. I think now, like, I'm so excited to get back at some point, hopefully when we get back to the girls. Like, we're just going to keep moving forwards, because everything that's happened the last 9 months or so has literally done a U-turn. So actually nothing more can throw at us, you know, nothing, there isn't anything else. You can't throw anything else at us. And I think that is what's so powerful. And I love the girls that I absolutely adore, all my teammates, because I spoke about it earlier, they're so strong and independent women that I'm like, wow, yeah, like you've got this, like you're dealing with that change, I can deal with this change. And I think for me as a captain, I've just got to keep reinforcing that it's okay and we will get through it, and almost trying to find the solution, which is what I try really hard at, is finding the solution earlier and then trying to feed that solution back to the girls to be like, it's okay, like we've got something going on. Because I am a bit of a fixer. It's probably a bad thing, but I try and fix a lot of things because I don't want people to ever feel like there's always an issue or there's a problem or like things are really bad. So trying to find that solution for me is kind of key.
Mm. Go ahead, Ben.
Anything to add?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question. I'm sitting there listening to you. I could sit there and just listen. It's a good question. I think certainly from a staff perspective, I think, you know, seeing those, first of all, I'm very biased in my opinion to this, but like I've seen quite a few other environments, but the sevens, the England sevens environment is incredibly special. Like, and I'll say a few points as to why I think that is. So I think first of all that unity between men and women's program is pretty unique in having them all based in sort of one location. We were a bit like that at Richmond when I was there, and Tom sort of Farrow, the lead S&C for the men's program, and Tapper sort of created that in having this sort of male and female environment training together. For this was years ago before Richmond sort of went out the female premiership. But I think that, you know, I started to see the workings of that and some of the benefits that having those sort of men and women in the same environment could have. And I think certainly, you know, that is a real big driver for why the sevens was such a special place. I think certainly around, like Abbie mentioned, around the closeness of the group. So like this girls group was a very unique group where you've got people who are very old, like Heather Fisher, and you've got people who are very young, like Beth and Jodie. But yet, you know, they were still really close. Like you've got a 20-year age gap and disparity between that. Probably like completely different humours, completely different life experiences, but yet, you know, they're almost really close as friends. And I think that, you know, certainly that closeness within the group and those relationships, you know, like Abbie said, they've been through a lot together, a lot of change. So I think that change then maybe resulted in that group being tighter as a group. I think certainly one thing myself, Charlie and Izzy tried to talk about all the time was having like a unity amongst staff. So making sure that we had like a united front, and then how we built relationships with the players to develop that culture. Like I've sat in tons of meetings before where teams have talked about values and what's our values this year? What are our team aims? And like, I'll be honest, 95% of the time it's complete bullshit. Like people don't live by those values. They're just words written on a page. No one really cares about them. Whereas like a massive testament to sort of Katie Warriner and Tom Hodgins in the fact that how they developed the values within the sevens, so that the female and male environments had different sort of sets of values and what was pertinent to them and their respective values. But like how, you know, Tom developed that with the group, with Abbie and with some of the senior players, and how that process took time. So it wasn't just words splattered on the pages. What actually means a lot to us, what resonates with us as a group, and actually living by those values is really key in developing any culture. And certainly I think because we had such a small squad size of 19, with sort of 4 or 5, 6 staff, if you include the doctors, the soft tissue, include sort of Joe management, include other coaches, you know, that you've almost got like a 1 to 2, 1 to 3 player to staff ratio. And, you know, at a lot of other rugby clubs, certainly within 15s, you've got a small staff with 40 odd players. So you don't develop that closeness and unity as a group. And then also around that comes the travel. You spend a lot of time with each other, traveling, coaches, buses, planes, economy class, where your feet are tied to each other half the time. So I think that amount of time, you know, really helps you. And you see some funny stuff while you're on tour. Like I'm sure Abbie has many stories about that. But you know, that time together really gels you and unites you as a team, because you have you have life experiences together, and a lot of life experiences you never forget. So like even in the short amount of tours I do with the girls, you know, that's some of my best personal and, you know, professional experiences, and, you know, it's something I wouldn't change for the world. And like Abbie said, we hope to continue that in pushing forward to Tokyo. So
Abbie, what are some of the values that you guys are pushing to put at the forefront of everything that you do to drive that spirit and you know, get the W at the end of the day?
Yeah, so like Ben saying, like me and Tom Hodges have been working with each other probably 4 years, to be fair, since I've been captain. And actually it's been a 3-year kind of work with the values and how do you get the best values. And James Bailey was a huge part to play in this side of it, in the culture. And he was always like, you know, I love him to death. Like, I've got a really good relationship still with him now. And he's very much like, but how? And like challenges you in a way of being like, so what do you want the values to be? And it was like, I don't know, like love and friendship, or I don't know. And it was like, I remember the first session we had, it was all just word vomit, and everyone just said whatever they thought. And then actually you kind of think about it, you're like, what do you actually love about this team? Why do you want to go and play for England? Why do you want to go and put your literally body on the line for your mate next to you? Like, why? And I think we dove quite deep into that, and actually the reasons why. So for example, one of the things we talk about is effort magic. Now this comes back a few years back, where kind of we went to qualify for Tokyo, and kind of no one really believed in us, and we were kind of like, oh, like even before this, to be fair, it was like, are people outside our sevens world, did they believe in us? Did they see the value in it? And actually there was magic within the squad, which is where the magic came from. Like, we've got some hella talent in this squad. That's where the magic came from. But you can't just have magic. You can't just have really good players. Like, you've got to have the effort. And I think that's kind of where that kind of came from. So we always talk about effort on effort on effort. And actually, you put in the effort, then you can do your magic, you know? So actually it's putting in the grind and putting in those hard times, and when it's raining outside and cold, and actually you got to go and do a speed session that Ben's going to try and make fun, but we all just want to go inside because it's raining. Those are the sessions that we need to put our effort in to then, when we go to Cape Town in December and it's glorious sunshine in front of thousands of people, we can then show our magic. And I think that was definitely something. And another thing that kind of always resonates with me is win the moment. So for me, it's always about each moment. Each moment I spoke about a little bit about your lifestyle as a professional athlete, and how you don't stop, you don't rest like until your rest period comes, and you literally are a completely different human because you're like, nah, I don't want to do anything. But you don't really rest as such. You always, which moment can I win? Like, how do I make myself, and something is my personal value is be a better me. So how do I become a better person? How do I become a better athlete? And it's always about those each moment and making those small adjustments along the way. And we talk about 1%ers. How do you put that 1% of, might be nutrition for someone, it might be fitness for somebody else, can be completely different. It's very personal. But actually that 1%, if we all did 1%, like Ben was saying, it's 20 people on the team, that's 20% better than we were doing. Do you know what I mean? So actually it's those kind of things that you have to work on it, and it's not an easy one. People can easily say this, that and this, but you have to live by it. And I think especially with how close and how small our squad was, that you couldn't not, because people would just see through it, and people do see through it because they haven't got that relationship. If people don't have that relationship people see right through it, and like you kind of get nowhere with it.
Yeah, and like you said, the small incremental progress that you can make on an individual basis is gonna disproportionately have a positive effect on the team afterwards, if you take care of your nutrition, if you go to sleep on time. But all those little things that maybe talk about some of those elements that maybe you've struggled with in the first few years, evolving at the high level in women's rugby. What are some of the adjustments that you've had to do to your lifestyle in order to be able to, be your best you on and off the field continually, for the whole season with your team, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it's definitely adjustment in my nutrition. I think one part, because I'm the kind of person, sorry if you're not, that can kind of eat anything, and it kind of be okay. And like my fitness is always all right, like my strength's always all right, and I don't struggle in that side of it. So actually, for me, if I wanted a biscuit at the end of the day, I could eat it and it literally would have no stress at all. But somebody else might do it and literally put on pounds. So I think it's that side of it, but also kind of going, do I need it at the same time? You know, and going, actually, although I can do it, I don't need it. And actually, do I want to be better? And you say you got like a 2-month period where actually you want to be really good because we're prepping and we're prepping for a certain competition, then actually that's then the time I'm like, right, just focus. It's being focused, and something I probably have struggled with, and I struggled with it at school. It's probably been from when I was little, was focusing, focusing in like even in lessons. I used to really struggle. I used to have probably half an hour in me and I'd be like, oh, gone now. Like, do you know what I mean? I was always that kid who kind of, what else is there? What else is going on? And kind of always wanted to be outside, wanted to be doing something different, I think. And that's kind of come through into my rugby, and especially in the first few years, I was very much like not really focused at the job in hand, I don't think. I think I absolutely loved my first year. I went to loads of competitions, loads of tours, very, very fortunate to go to the Olympic Games, and it was amazing, amazing experience. But something I reflect back on was I focused enough? And I don't really like saying it, but I wasn't probably as focused as I should have been. And not in like a bad way, but just in a, oh my God, this is the Olympic Games. Like, what? I'm 20 years of age, I'm at Olympic Games. It didn't sit with me because I was like, this is so crazy. It's just mad. And I think social media blows up and all these little things that you don't even think about blow up. And then all of a sudden it gets on top of you. And I think since probably then, I've been like, no, just stay focused, stay in the moment. And actually, yeah, we played Cape Town, played New Zealand, quarterfinals, we were drawing. I was like, yeah, fine. We still got this, stay focused, here and now. Unfortunately, we didn't do it, but it's those little reminders and those little checks actually keeping focus, I think, hopefully will put me in a really good place for the prep going into towards Tokyo, and hopefully will get me on that plane, is that staying focused in each moment and those pressured moments and those pressured matches that actually you need people to perform, and I can deliver it because I'm staying focused. I'm not thinking of this massive outcome. I'm thinking of the here and now.
Ben, how much of an impact does the outside stuff, quote unquote, the lifestyle, the nutrition, the sleep, the stress, the psychology, how much does that affect training from your perspective? And then how do you try and, like you said before, try to educate the squad as to what they can do to get better continuously?
Yeah, I think certainly, like I'm a big advocate of the basics, so I don't necessarily believe in you have to do all these sort of flashy recovery methods, etc. I think if you can get the stables of getting your sleep right, and sleep hygiene right, getting your nutrition right, like Abbie said, just making smart choices, 80, 90%, even 80% of the time. Certainly around that, and doing some mobility, going to the pool. I mean, we were very lucky at the Lensbury that we had access to sort of a sauna and a pool after every session that we wanted, and on our days off, so that there was sort of no excuses to get some of some of the basics right. Certainly around, I mean, like some of the more experienced players like Abbie and stuff knew all this information anyway, but certainly some of the younger ones, it was okay, what are a couple of key things? Don't overload them with information, but what are a couple of key things you can do to help you sleep better? Like, some of the younger girls are constantly on their phone 24/7. It's like, can you put your phone at least 30 minutes away before you want to go to bed? 30 minutes? What do you mean 30 minutes away? So it's like stuff around just simple things like that. Keeping a cool room, certain temperatures, trying to get it to like 17 degrees to optimal temperature. I think things around, some of the little key things that's going to help you sleep a little better. And then certainly around some of the nutritional choices, like, okay, Chris Curtis helped a lot with this with the nutrition side, is, what can I, and to be fair, Amy drove this as well and started to come up with and formulate a bit of a menu for the girls so that they had choices and selections. I think they color coded it. So it's like, okay, what do I need after each session? what fuel do I need to get? And this is a big weight session. How does that nutritional change from if it's, more of a longer rugby session, or it's an easier day today? I don't need to eat my chocolate protein almonds that the girls used to love. Like, you've not worked that hard for them yet.
So good. So good.
Yeah. They were really lucky to have the resources available. They had all the supplements available. They had really good food where they were. So there was no excuses whilst they were in the Lensbury. But it was, the majority of my time was spent, okay, what are you doing outside of this environment? So the simple things, like I said.
I think
sorry,
also, no, go on. On the back of that, I just, from a captain's point of view, a lot of how also I like to captain is leading by example. So although, like I said about the biscuit, although I could have the biscuit, actually, do the other girls need it? Probably not. So therefore, if I'm not having it, I can say, you don't need it. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of, you lead by example. And I think I probably do less talk, although I'm chatting loads here, I do less talking on the pitch and more leading by example, because people can see it and people witness it. So then they can be like, oh, she's doing that. Like, okay, we've got to do that, And I think that comes with off-pitch stuff as well as on pitch.
I think that comes back to that relationship, like I said at the beginning, about sort of female groups and having that like equal hierarchy and making sure that, okay, just because Abbie's doing something like this, so there's no disparity in that. So if they can see Abbie leading by that, there's like equal playing field almost, which in a female environment works well, like Abbie's saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to transition to a topic that is specific to female athletes and that is not spoken about enough, in my opinion. The reality is Abbie, you guys have to deal with menstrual cycles, which we don't. And some people might, throw that to the side and say, oh, it's just, a few days of the month and blah, 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 just get through it. But it does have a significant impact on performance, mood, many, many things that have to do with, your health first and foremost, and then your performance as well. So how do you navigate this personally as an athlete? And then is there a certain awareness that's trying to be developed at the squad level so that everybody's aware of the consequences of, not dealing with those things properly, or not maybe adjusting training according to certain things during certain periods of the month? So if you can kind of run us through this and talk about it a little bit, because I really think it's an important topic that needs to be, brought to light a little bit more.
Yeah, it's definitely a taboo topic. The amount of coaches that, and it's no disrespect to any of the coaches I've worked with, but the amount of coaches who don't understand it. And I think it's not in a disrespect way or a lack of kind of wanting to understand. It's just a lack of knowledge and kind of how everyone deals with something differently. Like, I might deal with it differently to how someone else in the team deals with it. The different aches and pains I get, someone else might be completely fine, but also really angry, or an emotional side will come out. And I definitely think it's taboo subject with it. I don't have any sciences like as much behind it, but I definitely went to a talk about it, and she was kind of saying like the invitation to the talk was to all like kind of female athletes and all their coaches. Now we were in this room and there was 100 people, and it was all the athletes. It wasn't the coaches. And it was really interesting because they spoke about how actually not the coaches don't want to hear about it, but it's almost like, oh, like, okay, you get periods. Like, I don't care. And actually, no, like, I'm getting this period and like, I feel really shit. I can't, like, do you know what I mean? I can't maybe lift as heavy in a gym, or I think actually when you're actually on your period or on your menstrual cycle, you can lift heavier or something. I think there's the science behind it that women do lift stronger when they're actually on. And I think then when you come off it, you need to get your nutrition better. So I know I eat more when I'm on, and like, it's just little things like that you don't realize. And I think for especially with the 7's, it's quite hard to manage training as such, because we're not individual athletes and we go all season. It's not like we aren't peaking for each month. Like, every other month we have competition, so it's not like we're individual. And like, if I was an individual athlete and I was a runner or something, you could really specify when I trained around it, because like, I was just me. But there's what, 15 of us on the squad. Like, we'd all miss, like, we'd be out there once a month or something. So it's kind of getting the balance, but also I think coaches do need to have a bit more ownership and kind of how we all deal with it, and kind of educate, especially male coaches or male staff members, and educating themselves how people deal with it and how it is beneficial, and it also can be detrimental. And that's obviously not our fault, but it's just how we then, like, how you deal with it. And maybe it's something that we definitely need to get better at, is that could be like almost a question of, how do you start the season, how are you on your period, like what are you like as a person, so people know. And it's just knowing it. Like, we don't care about talking about it, do you know what I mean? Like, we don't care, we'd rather tell people. So like, for example, I can tell Lonners, I feel rubbish, like I get backaches, like my legs hurt, but it only lasts a day and I should be fine the day. And he knows. And if I'm on my period that day, because we do loads of like well-being and monitoring stuff in the morning, but if he knows he's not going to come over to me and be like, come on, you can work really hard today, and like really push me, like just poke the bear, do you know what I mean? Because he knows. And and if he wants to, that's at his own risk, you know what I'm saying?
You're doing well, Abbie, keep going.
But do you know what I mean? So it's just basically, I think there needs to be more of an education piece on it, both for players and staff. I think as women, we can probably get better at understanding it more, and not using it as seen as an excuse. Because I think sometimes staff like coaches might be like, oh, are you just using this as an excuse? And actually understanding that some people might be and some people might not be, you know. And actually, but it's the educational part, I think, is the most important. And then also talking about it is the second part, and just making it a normal topic. Because especially, I think this is right, don't quote me on this, but I think injury risks when girls on their period is greater. So it's just how you like manage it, I guess, around it.
Ben, I'll let you bounce on that in a second. But going back to what you were saying, Abbie, and thanks for talking about this openly. I think it is very important that both athletes and coaches get educated on that topic, because as a coach, you're bound to work at some point with a female client, a female athlete. And like you said, it does change quite a few things for, again, like you said, very individual responses, a bit like nutrition. Everybody has different, specific needs, and then everybody's going to react differently throughout their menstrual cycle. But it has to be acknowledged and it has to be taken into account, because you could do some damage if you don't take those things into account. And I think just even from the word comfort comes to mind, but it's maybe not the right one. Just, making sure that you girls are being heard by the staff, and that the staff just knows that it is like you said, it's not an excuse. It's a reality. It's biology. It's like, we're human, and this is how it works. And maybe, just shedding light on it and making sure that everybody's aware that it's a thing. It doesn't need to be a big thing. It is a thing, and we need to work with it. Is definitely a very important part. Ben, I know you had a couple things to add on that.
Just on that, I think it's like, that's 100%, and I think it's just making it not a taboo subject.
Exactly.
But also, it is an educational thing, and I think it's an educational thing for players, staff. It's for everyone. And actually, I'd love to learn more. Like, why do I feel like this? Why do I feel like I don't want to get out of bed today? Like, why? That's so frustrating. But actually, if I go and I know, so when I exercise, I feel better for it. So then actually, it's understanding that. It is definitely an educational bit. Sorry, Ben.
No. It's interesting to hear from an athlete perspective. I'm quite lucky in the fact that, like, one of the lectures I had to deliver, like across sort of rehab and strength and conditioning programs, was around sort of the female athlete. So we sort of, I'm by no means an expert in this area, but we had to talk about some of the challenges with regards to the menstrual cycle. And I put down a few things from my lecture on here just to mind jot me today. But so if you look at the menstrual cycle, there's three stages of that. So you've got your like follicular stage, you've got your ovulation, and then you've got your luteal stage. Now I'm sure the guest went into far more detail about this the other day than I'm going to, but you have sort of a pre-estrogenic spike around sort of that early follicular stage, and then that mid-luteal stage. And then around that, you have also progesterone, which is sort of quite important when discussing about sort of the female cycle as well. And I think, like Abbie said around, and before I guess go into some of these details, for me, a lot of this is you talk about psychology trumping physiology. So although some of the research and data suggests maybe no necessary changes in specific phases for certain sort of physical qualities, in fact, like the most important thing is what the athlete actually feels like. So like, although the literature and stuff has contradicting evidence around sort of strength changes through different phases, okay, what does Abbie actually feel like? Because if she feels good in this stage, okay, let's use that. If she doesn't, okay, by me telling her that this paper says this, she's going to turn around to me and go, no, I know how I feel. And that's fair enough. You know how you feel as an athlete. So, yeah, I think that's the important thing to bear in mind with this. But certainly around sort of strength changes, there's some studies that look at, you know, in those estrogenic spikes, sort of certainly that late follicular stage and stuff, that you get sort of increase in sort of maximum voluntary contractions, and then talk about, okay, so how do I structure my training when someone's in their early stage of their menstrual cycle? Do I front load that program in terms of some of the strength and hypertrophy adaptations, and then maybe change the focus as they sort of go post ovulation and into that luteal stage? You know, a lot of studies do show that there's actually sort of no difference in sort of maximum voluntary contraction. Now, again, you have to take every study with a pinch of salt. Is that what is the population they tested on? Was it elite? Was it sedentary? And again, you know, are you using sort of isolated muscles, or are you within some sort of dynamic task as well? So that will completely change in how you know the literature is read as well. I think certainly around core temperature and around changes of that. So it increases in concentration of progesterone actually increases the core temperature of an individual. Now, does that then have effect on sort of perceived RPE value? And then when you're doing a session, you need to then have, you know, an understanding of that. Going, I know sort of what phase Abbie's at. I know that she's found this session, you know, really hard today. This is normally an easy session for Abbie. She's normally a 4 or 5, but now she's doing an 8 and 9. And is that based on some of the core temperature changes? And around sort of estrogen, then, you know, attenuating those thermoregulatory sort of effects, and does it balance it out? I think certainly around fatigability as well. So I'm just looking at a couple of points that I made. So the greater the concentration of estrogen during sort of that luteal stage, like I said, it has the potential to reduce fatigability. So it has some sort of glycogen, you know, sparing effect. So again, like are the endurance qualities, and like I say, does that then affect some of the RPE values within sort of, you know, different stages of the hormone cycle? And again, I know that there's different sort of metabolic responses between sort of lower and upper extremity muscles, and how they fatigue and how they react to estrogen and estrogen receptors on each. You know, there's all these different things that you then need to think about. And then certainly around, you know, some of the neuromuscular changes that, you know, the girls have, like Abbie mentioned about the higher injury rate. So it talks about, you know, like Tim Hewitt's done a ton of research into ACL ruptures and different stages of the menstrual cycle. Now, you know, estrogen and relaxin has an effect on sort of the ligament laxity, tendon muscular laxity. You know, estrogen has an effect on certain components, on sort of collagen resynthesis, on sort of tendinous and ligamentous structures. Now, obviously, you're supposed to be more, I guess, more pliable and have more sort of laxity within your joints during sort of your late follicular stage, where that you have that estrogen spike. Now, that's something you need to take into consideration. And, you know, then you have to start to think about your oral contraception. So now estrogenic rise is quite good for tendon health. So when there's an estrogenic rise, you normally get more, like I say, it has an effect on tendons where you get more tendon compliance. So you talk about this balance and performance of tendon stiffness and increasing sort of rate of force development qualities in players, or tendon compliance. Now, when there's an estrogenic spike, yes, it's probably better for healthier tendons, but in terms of performance gains, you know, you probably want a slightly stiffer tendon, more increased risk to injury. But then at those stages where there's not that estrogenic spike, you know, you can start to develop more tendon stiffness qualities. Now, then you talk about people who are on oral contraceptives, and, you know, there's papers that look at that athletes, even though they might not want to go on or might not need them, how oral contraceptives actually flatten out that estrogen and progesterone and give you a more steady supply throughout the cycle. That if you are peaking for, say, an Olympic Games or competition, you know, some athletes will go on oral contraceptives just to flatten out that estrogenic level so they can get that increased stiffness within a tendon, because their ultimate aim is for that rate of force development, that, you know, explosive reactive quality. So, you know, then you go into a completely different realm, that you're now talking about, you know, females who are ingesting stuff to change hormones, and you know, you can go into a minefield with all this. So there's like a huge amount of, you know, research out there. It's still a very new area, so there's still very limited research on how menstrual cycle affects like neuromuscular function. You've then got sort of anatomical differences, so things like they talk about differences in female Q angles and whether that affects tibial torsion, you know, femoral anteversion. You then look at sort of narrowing of that intercondylar notch. So because females have a slightly smaller intercondylar notch, does that lead to a smaller ACL? You then talk about foot position, and do females then suffer from increased pronation, which relates to like a navicular drop, which then increases the anterior tibial translation. You then talk about, you know, quad hamstring ratio at different stages of the menstrual cycle, and how, you know, more males have an early activation of of hamstring over quadricep, so protects that tibial translation of that tibia. Whereas, you know, females are quite quad dominant naturally, so therefore probably doesn't help in that anterior translation. So how can you even out that ratio? And then, you know, then other factors around sort of landing mechanics, deceleration mechanics, and how that, you know, that all changes as well. But I think, you know, I wrote a little note to myself and I said, you know, there's all these differences in menstrual cycle, and there are changes. And like I said about Abbie's point, is that the psychology does trump physiology. But if you have a big group of individuals, does a good training program negate all the challenges that females face with the menstrual cycle? So if you have a good understanding of their perception and their psychology around it, by you having an awareness of that, like Abbie's saying, by looking at some of the wellness data and a conversation with an athlete around that time, that you know that they're going to feel susceptible, does a good training program and a well-planned training program actually just help and negate all these differences that you potentially see in fairly new research? So sorry to ramble on about a bit more you have.
No.
It's a really
interesting one. It's a really interesting one, and I think it's helping it. I don't think I agree with the changing the program. I don't think because there isn't enough, to me. There's not enough data with it, and actually you don't need to change it. You just need to, you understand an athlete, and actually you have to, like me and Ben are saying, is you have to take time, and that, like, that educational piece is the well-being piece, and it's a bit of everything. It's not changing this, it's just going, okay, you're not okay today, okay, we'll get through it today, tomorrow you'll be fine again, you know. And it's how you work with individual athletes within a team sport, rather than making a program for an individual.
Yeah, maybe to bring that back to the practical side, Abbie, if you could give an advice to, you know, maybe female athletes who are listening and who maybe don't have the luxury of having understanding coaches and staff, how can they bring that forward to maybe a coach in a performance environment, just so that it is, you know, known, and that, again, we try to break those taboos, because I think what Ben did on the education side is super interesting and relating some of the research. But at the end of the day, we need more people to talk about it. So what would you recommend to someone who's maybe a little bit afraid to talk about those things?
Yeah, I think it's a real tough one. It's not an easy thing to do at all. Something I'd probably do if I was in that situation is firstly see if there's a female staff member to speak to, and actually be like, because it is more comfortable to speak about that kind of stuff if you're not as confident. But I would then probably find like an educational piece. So online, there's a company, it's Lucy's and Sisters, and they are trying to break this taboo. And there's like different, like, kind of almost videos or athletes, and there's this podcast right here, you know. There's this podcast that you can take. If I was an athlete and wasn't so sure, I'd be like, could you listen to this part of this podcast, because actually I'm really struggling, like, I just want you to hear it. And if the coach kind of doesn't react well to it, then a little bit that's on them, like that's a bit shit on them. But even if the first step is kind of just saying it and like acknowledging it and making them aware of how you feel. And actually, I always believe if that's how somebody feels, you can't be wrong. You cannot be wrong with how you feel. So if that's how they feel, that's how they feel. And it's just the after part will also be easier because they know how you feel. And then hopefully you can just educate them and educate yourself into how you fix that problem.
And Ben,
Abbie,
from...
sorry, I was just going to ask.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask Abbie I'm just really intrigued. So, from a male staff member in a female environment, what do you feel that like a male staff member could do to maybe help that process? Do you think it's worth initiating a conversation just so you raise a point that you have an awareness of this, and that it's an important factor to discuss to try and make sure the group are comfortable with that? Like what would be maybe your advice for some?
If the male staff member came and just said, look, I know you all have periods, I know you all have menstrual cycles, like I'd like to understand each of you individually. Oh, okay, great. Like, we don't care, we don't want to, like, we're not trying to hide it, and like some people might be a bit more embarrassed about it, but actually it's so natural, it's super natural. And I think if the male staff member or whoever it is took the first step, often that is easier, because you go, okay, this is a thing they need to do for the whole squad. It's not just me. It's he's trying to understand everyone in this squad, and it's more of a, oh, like, you want to understand us on a nutrition point of view. Oh, okay, I understand. Oh, you want to understand us on a sleep point of view. Oh, okay, I understand. Oh, you want to understand us on a period point of view. Oh, okay, I understand. And do you know what I mean? It just kind of gets into that normality, because it is so normal.
Ben, maybe if you can close that topic with a piece of advice to coaches who might still, after even listening to that, still be reticent to actually dive into it and just understand it a little bit better and open up that line of communication with their female athletes. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it is, like Abbie said, it is a hard topic to discuss, but I think it's part of your role as sort of a strength and conditioning practitioner to have an awareness of this. So your role is to have an awareness of all aspects of performance and how they can affect that individual.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as Abbie's pointed out, this is a big area and a big aspect for female athletes on their performance. So I think having some, even if it's just a basic awareness of some of the basic fundamentals around, what are the challenges faced, what do the changes lead to, sort of in terms of physiology, etc. And just being able to be open, and have that discussion with your athletes. I think that'll get you a long way. And this all relates to some of the stuff that me and myself and Abbie spoke about at the beginning, and is how do you build that environment, build that culture within your female group, and showing that you care. For me, is a big thing for buy-in. And again, this relates to that. So I go up to Abbie and start discussing this. So she's like, well, he actually cares. So I think that all relates back to some of the earlier points.
No, those are all great points, guys. Thanks again for talking about this. I have a last few quick questions for you guys. We're going to go into the rapid fire questions. So we're going to bounce back and forth. I'm going to start with you, Ben. What's something you've changed in your programming or your coaching recently that's had a significant impact?
I think involvement with the athlete. The athlete knows themselves well. So making sure you involve an athlete in that process is really important.
Yeah, perfect. Abbie, what's something you changed in your daily routine recently that's had a significant impact?
Going on more walks, actually. Taking a bit more time just to be with myself a little bit more. And kind of sounds really, don't know, cliche, but be with nature a little bit, be a bit more relaxed.
Ben, what's your favorite movement to coach?
Probably sprint mechanics, max velocity acceleration, sprint mechanics.
Nice. Abbie, what's your favorite movement to train?
Probably be sprinting, to be fair, recently. I never thought I'd say that, but it's all about rugby for me. Everything, all about rugby. The skill element is just, is my favourite part.
Not trap bar deadlift. What are you talking about?
Gym and like the mechanic side isn't a bit of me, but I'm learning to love it.
Ben, what's a book to read?
Read that Top Dog. It's good if you want to have an understanding of female and male differences, and it's all about competition and how competition evolves over time, and how competition is the basis for everything. So
Abbie, same question for you. What's a book you would recommend?
I can't remember what it's called. You mentioned it earlier, the leadership one, Class of Leaders. What did you call it, Ben?
Oh, Captain Class. The Captain's Class.
Yeah, Captain's Class.
Captain's Class, nice. Last one, guys. Ben, favorite player ever?
Emma, yeah.
It's
Aside
a
from
trick.
Still waiting, still waiting.
It is a trick question.
obviously Abbie Brown, but I always wind him up and say I'm the biggest Dan Norton fan, so I have to say that live on air as well.
You have to give him a shout out. He would hate you, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. So, but this is apart from Abbie Brown. So Dan Norton's a close second.
Obviously.
Abbie, how about you?
Probably a girl called Polite who plays for Australia. I think she's incredible. She's an absolutely incredible athlete. Speed, fitness, her strength. Yeah, she's incredible.
Guys, I want to thank you again so much for coming on the podcast today. Where can we find you both on social media?
Go on, Abbie, you go first.
I don't know what they are. Instagram, I think it's Abbie Brown 13, and my Twitter is Abbie Brown 10.
Correct. It's in the description. Yes, you know your handles. Okay, guys, it's in the description if you're not sure. So go click on the link. Ben?
At Loners7 on Instagram, and I think it's at Loners77 on Twitter. So
perfect. That's correct as well. Good answers for both of you. Again, guys, thank you so much for coming on today. It was great fun chatting with you guys.
Thanks so much.
Sean.